the Evolution Security Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast. This is Aaron Davis and Eric Davis, the self-proclaimed tactical twins. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, man. Good to see you, man. This is always a lot of fun, and I always welcome a good discussion with you, man. Being twins, man, we've been best friends all of our lives, and so it's awesome to hang out with you as always.
Yeah, we've lived so far away for so long. It is still great that we get to do this show and this business together. I mean, if people could just really understand what a blessing it is for us to do it.
Well, and Aaron, we also, in the accountability of this show, we get to talk about the fact that we just got to hang out together for over a week. So, yeah, we're going to hit that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Well, Eric, hey, why don't you tell our listeners about this awesome interview we have?
Well, man, we got a super cool guest, a guest that represents several aspects of what Aaron and I do, which is also why it's exciting to have somebody that does jiu-jitsu. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt under Hickson Gracie, and he also has this awesome company where he provides executive protection security to some of our favorite bands. So we'll kind of talk about that in the show. Don't want to hit too hard on it right now because we want that in the interview. So, yeah, Todd Fox of Tour Protection is an incredible guest, and we're looking forward in the future to training with him as well. So stay tuned for that possibility. But, yeah, so before we get to this interview, we're going to go ahead and talk about our sponsors. Aaron, what you got?
Well, let's talk about Origin. You know, they provide some of the highest quality jiu-jitsu gear, clothing, and supplements that's available, period. Just a reminder that they are all American made, from the cotton that's grown here to the end of the production line, all from America. And, you know, I just wanted to say a quick word about my new Pathgi that I got a few weeks ago. Man, it is, well, let me digress a little bit. I got it because my Axiom gi is awesome, but it is just a little bit hot during the summer. So I got this Pathgi, which is a little bit lighter weight, and I'm telling you, it's some of the nicest material I've ever felt. It's their American Smart Pearl Weave. I guarantee you it's the nicest gi top you've ever seen. So why don't you go ahead and check out their site? That's originmaine.com, and just check out the incredible full line that they have of all kinds of incredible product. And when you get to checkout, when you find something you like on there, use EvoSec 10, that's EVOSEC 10 at checkout for 10% off.
Well, Aaron, I'd like to mention last night, my jiu-jitsu workout, I was wearing my Discipline Equals Freedom, the Jocko gi, and I'm always pumped when I wear that gi. I wear it probably about the third of the time, if not half the time. And man, it's just such a cool statement, you know, the Discipline Equals Freedom, because after I had that nice workout, I got to eat a nice meal and have a nice cold drink. So that's one of the benefits of training hard is we also get to enjoy ourselves too. So yeah, man, the Discipline Equals Freedom gi is probably my favorite gi I own, and it uses the same American Smart Pearl weave. So yeah, man, pumped about those gis.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about Tenacore. Tenacore produces some of the best, if not the best holsters on the market. They know what they're doing when they produce holsters because they test them in pressure tested environments like ECQC and like also the class we just took, intermediate action combatives, because you want to know that your gear is going to hold up in a weapons-based grappling environment, and these guys do know that. So check out tenicor.com, TENICOR.com, and use EvoSec at checkout for 10% off.
Great. Well, you want to go ahead and get into this interview with Todd?
Let's do it, man. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome Todd Fox of Tour Protection to the show. Todd, great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks, gents. Honored to be with you.
Yeah, it's amazing, this community. Rich Brown hooked us up and said, hey, I think you guys would hit it off fairly well. So I thought that was awesome. It's really cool in this industry to get the support out of guys like Rich and Mike. So it's awesome to have this acquaintance brought to us. And we definitely have been wanting to set this up, for about 4 weeks now, maybe?
A little while, man. I appreciate Rich setting it up as well, man. Good guy. Really good guy.
Yeah, so I'll just hit on just a few highlights for the audience, and then I'll turn it over to you for a little bit of a bio. So I just wanted to hit the top of it. So Todd is a protection services subject matter expert, and he is a Marine and a Hickson Gracie black belt, which has an awesome pedigree in and of itself. I think the other thing that Rich was kind of pushing us together on, Todd, was your weapons-based background. So we want to kind of hit on some of that tonight as well. But for our audience that may not know you, go ahead and hit a bio for us.
Well, you started pretty well. So as a young guy, right out of high school, I graduated early, went in the Marine Corps. While I was in the Marine Corps, I started training martial arts with a guy named Rigo Vaghi. I had already had a black belt in karate and started with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with him. And then I started what would be called at the time NHB, or No Holds Barred. And then that is essentially the predecessor of MMA. I was fighting professionally still in the Marine Corps. I had a bunch of B-billets. One of the B-billets I had was recruiting. And, I had recruiters coming out and doing pull-up challenges and all that crazy stuff to promote the Marine Corps at my fights. And then I ended up doing protective service operations with a number of groups, predominantly executives, a few dignitaries. And then I ended up in LA at what's called the Motion Picture Liaison, which has all the branches, but the Marine Corps has an office with 3 guys in it. And then I met some people at Hickson Gracie's Academy in Los Angeles, one of which was Guy Ritchie. So I had been going and doing work down in Mexico, and he knew I did security work, but he didn't really care about that. He was more interested in the jiu-jitsu and MMA. So he essentially introduced me to his wife, who he had just married, who was Madonna. And then that kind of sent me in a celebrity direction. So I own a company that's called Close Protection Corps, and we have a bunch of subs under it, and one is Tour Protection. And our focus is music tours and films on location. And probably 80% of what we do is entertainment based, whereas the other 20% is split. And I'd say 10% executive and 10% governmental, NGO, and the likes.
So you do quite a bit of overseas, from what I understand. Listening to by the way, the AWS interviews, I've listened to both of them. Phenomenal interviews.
Hey man, thanks for your support. I appreciate that. I had a good interviewer.
Oh yeah. Rich is awesome. So one of the things that really stuck out to me is just your broad clientele, including Hollywood and overseas. So how much you still do quite a bit overseas work as well?
Yeah, I would say that the majority, the lion's share, is overseas. I mean, we still do stuff in the U.S. We don't really do much in the way of films in the U.S. because the studios have their own security guys. We're kind of like corporate security types on set, and they have a ton of extra physical security. Like they have their concentric layers on the set, and they're good there. They're supportive with law enforcement, both active and retired guys. So our core competency with films is in doing, advanced site surveying, setting up an infrastructure overseas for them to be able to do, those shoots on location. So the vast majority of our filming is overseas. I would say probably 70% of our tours are overseas. And then the vast majority of our executives and dignitaries and a few of the other entities that are governmental are overseas.
Well, and you kind of hit on the Hollywood liaison, but it seemed like you were, from what I understand, that you were well into protective services before them, but a lot of what you do, Hollywood and also musician wise, did that kind of come from your Hollywood liaison of the Marine Corps? Was a lot of that what got you into that, or got at least clients?
Yeah, I was a Midwestern boy, so my exposure was basically the Marine Corps and fighting, and so the access to people in Hollywood, which, as you probably have surmised, that's not necessarily my demographic, and so
Right.
so that's a hard transition to make. Things are pretty real in the Marine Corps, and then obviously I stint in law enforcement, and it was very, very different than that realm as well. But most of my clients from entertainment came from that world, and we have kind of a niche market there because in the entertainment realm, you have a lot of people that are very large and they don't really know anything about security. They're essentially this static post figure, this post that's maybe some type of protective service, but they have no training, no background, no understanding, and they actually create more problems than they solve. But the entertainer doesn't understand what it is they're hiring him to do, and so they get a lot of the aesthetic factor. And so we don't have so much of that. Most of the guys on my team are on the smaller side for protective services. And so, we got the people for the most part in terms of clients that actually care about what it is they're doing and how it's done. And they want a lot of layers to their security. And they're looking at guys to do advanced site surveys, set everything up, get, that local national feeling to be right and comfortable, have those relationships. And they want people around them that aren't going to draw attention and do those kinds of things. So we're still a small portion of the entertainment side. I think the biggest section of that by far is music touring, just because it's so dynamic and they understand what's at risk there.
Todd, this is Aaron. I am actually, both of us are musicians, but I've done at a small level quite a bit of touring and quite a bit of gigging, but nothing that you would have ever worked for. But it fascinates me to hear about that, and I think our listeners are going to really enjoy it because this is a great, different topic to cover within our self-defense, paradigm and genre. So you're saying a lot of your work is working on tours with musicians?
Yeah, about 80% of our total business comes from entertainment. And of that entertainment, probably 80 to 90% are music tours. So we have about 50 different artists that are musicians. They range from, kind of mid-size acts that are playing arenas to like 12,000 people to massive acts who are playing to 75,000 a night in a stadium across the world. So we don't do much on the small end. Like I said, kind of the lower end for us is a group that might sell 12,000
Wow.
tickets in arena.
Well, so hopefully, of course, you don't want to name names, but I mean, this is a world that most people don't even hear about. Can you kind of give an idea to the audience of what that looks like to create a security apparatus for a tour, and what does that look like on any given concert night?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I don't know what your demographic wants to hear, but it's a little monotonous. At the end of the day, what happens is you have an artist, a band, you can name whatever band you want. They have a manager who manages their trajectory as far as their career is concerned. And then they have an agent who basically makes deals for them. When they do music tours, essentially what happens is the agent goes out and books the shows with venues, and there's generally a concert promoter like a Live Nation or an AEG. So usually in this day and age, they make new music so that they can go out on tour because they don't make any money off albums anymore, right? Or downloads. Their money comes from the actual concert, which is the opposite of what it used to be 20 years ago. So basically they say, okay, we're, rock band X, and we're going to go out and we're going to figure out what we want to do. What is our album cycle? Where are we going to go from here? What are we going to do? What do we think we're worth, and how do we want to start this out? So they can start out real big, or they can do what's called underplay, which is like taking a band that would play in a stadium and putting them in not an amphitheater, but like a small theater of 3,000 to 5,000. So they know that the supply is way lower than the demand, and that drives up hysteria. And so they can do that, or they can say, screw it, we're going big, we're going straight into the stadium. So they structure kind of a deal, and they figure out what they want to do, and they figure out what they think they can sell, and then they make their deals with the promoters through the booking agents. And then what happens is they start to select their staff for different things. That's typically when we get hired by a manager, and sometimes we get hired by the artist themselves. So it depends. In music touring, there are predominantly three functions, right? You have an advanced site survey, which really, for us, we call that venue security on that side. And then you have, the personal security detail, which is, the individual, what people refer to as a bodyguard, the PSD, PSO. And then you have kind of an overall director who handles both of those entities if the tour is big enough. So before it starts, usually about 6 to 8 weeks out, sometimes as far as 6 months out, we'll start getting information on it, right? And so the first thing that you would do is you'd figure out, okay, with that artist, who are we dealing with, right? You start to get a demographic build. So if I'm dealing with an artist who, let's say, has a long history of doing crazy, violent things on stage, and the crowd does crazy, violent things, I have to build a plan for specifically that. Let's say I have an artist who speaks on religious topics or political topics from stage. That's another problem, right? Who are they singling out, and what are the ramifications of that? What kind of things are they going to stir up? So I start to grab the demographic and say, okay, is it predominantly male, female? What are the percentages? Okay, what are the age groups? What are the associated activities at the events, right? Do they crowd surf? Do they mosh? Do they throw chairs? Do people use crystal meth? Do they smoke pot and stare at the wall? Do they eat acid? Or do they get drunk? So there's a very big difference between a lot of our demographics. We can be doing a boy band like One Direction, and these guys have young females who are teeny boppers, and their activities are very different. Also, the amount of logic that young girls are using compared to, say, a 65-year-old man who has something to lose, it's very different. So how you negotiate with them, manage that's different, which changes the structure of your plan. So we grab our demo, then we figure what we're playing to, right? Are we going to be in theaters? Are we going to be in arenas? Are we going to be in amphitheaters? Are we going to be in stadiums? And once we figure that out, we scale our plan, right? We write up what's called a security advance. And like I said, we know the demographic, we know the scale of this particular show, we know the activities we're likely to see. And so we build something that would support that kind of event. So in the security advance that we send out, basically it tells them, hey, here's the demo, here's what we're expecting, here's how long the show is going to be, here's what's going to happen at the show. The guys are leaving the stage, they're running out, we have pyrotechnics, we have this, we have that, we have video, we have whatever it may be. The artist is going out in the crowd. We tell them what we can, then we tell them what we want, right? So I need to come up with a plan. What do I need for medics? What do I need for police? What do I need for bomb dogs and sweeps? What do I need for fire, right? Especially if I'm having pyrotechnics, that's a big deal. Then I get into things like staffing, right? Staffing deployments of how many guys do I need? Where do I need them? When do I need them? What budget am I working inside of? How do I redeploy people and scale that staffing call? And then obviously the personal guys, their job tends to be more of a personality profile. Like, what is the personality of that particular artist? And am I working with a singular artist, or am I working with a band who I've got 4 personality types versus, a singular guy like a Roger Waters, who's a one individual, and I only have to worry about that personality profile, and I don't have to worry about it clashing because he's the head guy and that's it. So that's in a very, very, very small nutshell kind of what the job is. And then there is the actual implementation of those measures and systems, and a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, a lot of emails, a lot of structuring, and then a lot of movement because you're going city to city, right? Or you're going country to country overseas. And we're charged with that, protecting the assets, protecting the humans on the tour, and then predominantly protecting, the individuals that hire us, which are the artists. And then in addition to that, we have, the liability component of protecting the crowd as well, or putting measures in place to safeguard them.
Well, that's pretty fascinating. And, I think our audience does like that detail because again, this is a very different topic in the self defense world. But what I'm interested again, you may or may not, of course, not naming any names. Do you have any interesting war stories you would like to go into on, some things that have caused challenges, et cetera? I mean,
there are a lot of them, but most of them I can't talk about. The thing about it is with the clients, the entertainment clients, we can disclose most of that because they disclose our information. So if they're out there telling people, hey, these guys are looking after us, or they put it in touring books, or they float it to the public, which is their option, and we can talk about it. If they talk about stories or events that occurred, usually overseas, then we can talk about it. So the good ones typically they don't want to talk about because they don't want that attention, they don't want that heat. And to be fair, I think most of the stories kind of revolve around culture overseas. When, for example, we operate a lot in Mexico, we operate a lot in Brazil and Colombia and these places in Latin America, and so you have odd things that occur that would never occur in America, and I think those are more interesting. We have the life-saving events, whether it's medical or otherwise, guys rolling up with AKs in Eastern Europe trying to basically keep you hostage. That all that stuff has happened, but it doesn't happen every day. What happens every day are the cultural events, right? So, for example, one of the first times I took artists down to Mexico, we had gone into a restaurant in Mexico, and the vehicles were outside, and we had basically rotated drivers. And when we rotate drivers, some guys are there, some guys are not. And as you know, with local national forces, the guys don't always pay attention and do what they're supposed to do. The idea of keeping a guy with the car is if we have a problem, we have at least one guy in the car ready to go. We can throw our principal in GTFO. So we went in, restaurant, did our thing. As we come out with the principal vehicle, while the drivers are, there's a cop there writing a ticket, complaining to him or mentioning to him that he doesn't have plates. Obviously, this guy had plates, his local national vehicle. And so they go back and forth, whatever. He doesn't know how to handle it, and I'm not sure why, because he should be used to this. So I'm talking to the cop in Spanish, and he's like, "Hey, you don't have plates." I'm like, we came with plates, and the other vehicles have plates. And as he's looking around and whatever, he just keeps writing the ticket. And he goes back to his car, and I walk over, and I, at this point, kind of like, this is a little weird that we don't have plates. The other vehicles have plates. And I say, okay, what's the deal? Where are the plates? What do you want for them? So basically he tells me in pesos the equivalent of $20. So I give him $20. So he rips up the ticket in front of me, which he probably wasn't even writing anything on. And then after that, I'm like, okay, well, where are the plates? And he just looks at me like, stone cold looks at me. It's okay. How much for those? Another $20. Reaches into his patrol car, pulls the plates out, hands them back. Now that's law enforcement. So that's a stark difference from the United States, right? And so those are kind of the more interesting, I think, experiences and lessons that occur frequently overseas with us.
Well, real quick, Todd, because I know, our audience can go out there and check out your website. There's several clients that are mentioned on there. Are there any that you would want to disclose on the air? Because I think that's kind of cool, some of the clients you've had.
I mean, if they're mentioned on that website, that's because they've mentioned us and talked about us working for them and protecting them. So once that's public knowledge, we can discuss it. Obviously, we don't get into their personal backgrounds or where we're going and when we're going and how we're doing things. But at the end of the day, it's public knowledge. If you see it on our site, it's good to go. And if you look on our site, you'll notice we don't talk about executives. We don't talk about governmental or NGO. I mean, I don't even list. I had a state law enforcement agency contact me last week, and consequently, we're teaching one right now in a 40-hour basic DT course. But they contact me like, where is this and where is that? And I don't see it on your website. It's like, we don't list governmental entities on the website. So if you see something that you guys want to talk about on the website, please feel free to ask, and I'm happy to discuss it.
So I'll kind of hit on a couple. My wife's a huge Coldplay fan, and I noticed that you guys have done protection for them. Of course, Tool. I know you've spoke on them before, and that's kind of one of the segue questions. I'm curious, did you happen to have any influence on Maynard of Tool's jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so I'll come back to the first thing I'll say is that Coldplay we handle, but we typically handle them in Africa, in South America, and Mexico.
Nice.
And the guys are good. They treat our guys very well. They've done a lot of things for our actual employees. So I like that. And even where, they may have a very different idea politically or otherwise, they've been good people to us, and you can't really ask for any more than that when you have a relationship with an artist. So that's one. And two, on the tool front, we've handled tool for more than 20 years. And obviously I've worked with Maynard as his personal guy for a long time, and handled his overall for Tool and Perfect Circle and Pussifer, his three bands, and then a bunch of wine tours that we've done with his Caduceus wines. But yeah, the reason that I know Maynard is through jiu-jitsu, and I started training him 20 years ago. He's not training as frequently, say, as I do, and he's not competing like I do and doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've worked with him for more than 20 years. When we go out on the road, we take mats out on the road, we take gloves and mitts and focus pads, and we get after it when we can, and try to keep him healthy and developing and growing with his jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai.
Man, that's awesome. We're huge Tool fans. Of course, Aaron mentioned us being musicians, and our audience members probably get tired of hearing it, but we mention to our guests sometimes that we play the bumper music on the show, so that's something that's near and dear to us. So did you have any dealings with Danny Carey, speaking of drumming, because I'm a drummer?
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with Danny Carey for 20 years. Danny's one of the few artists that I've worked with that's a really serious weightlifter. Danny is from Kansas, and he went to KU, and he's a big basketball player, and so he's got like a weight rack that he travels with. Like the guy's a beast of a man to start with, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons he can produce some of the sounds that he produces. But on top of that, he's a huge fitness guy and really into working out. So more of my relationship with Danny has to do with that than it does with the music. But yeah, Danny's been around, and I've been around Danny for 20 plus.
Very cool. Yeah, he's influenced my drumming big time. And I laugh a little bit as I've had a renaissance in my drumming, and my brother can attest to this too. I just recently got a double pedal again for my kid, and I actually have been playing quite a bit of Tool stuff just recently in my practice session. So it's kind of a cool conversation, frankly.
Yeah, Danny, from my perspective, I'm not a drummer and I don't know much about drumming, so I can't speak to the actual skill of drumming. But Danny's kit is the most complex kit I've ever seen being around musicians. Like, it is crazy complex, and everything, that he's doing to get the sounds that he's getting, it's serious work. And so that drum tech is earning his money for sure.
Well, Todd, the fact that Danny is, in rock music, there's a lot of greats out there. Neil Peart, Tim Alexander, Primus.
I know Tim very well too. That's interesting. Yeah.
Say that again.
I know Tim very well also.
Oh yeah, now you're making me jealous because he's my biggest influence. I've never met him though.
Yeah, he's a good guy, very laid back, very relaxed guy. He came out and he toured with us on Pussifer. He played drums for a tour or two. And he'd come out with me on days off and train jiu-jitsu. He wasn't huge into jiu-jitsu, but he had fun, and, he didn't take himself too seriously, and he went out and learned some stuff. And good guy, very relaxed, cool guy, skilled guy, obviously.
Man, that's awesome. See, this is a cool conversation. We didn't know that the music was going to come so much into the front of the discussions, but that's awesome. Yeah, Tim Alexander, back when I was real serious about drumming, I was named Herb Jr. So it's kind of cool that get to come back full circle and meet, and discuss it with somebody that's been around him. That's pretty neat.
I'll shoot him a text. He'll have a giggle that you asked me about him on a security podcast. So I'll shoot him a note when we hang up this call.
Yeah, and then tell him that I'd love to take online lessons from him if he's doing that.
Well, when I get the podcast, what I'll do is I'll just forward him the podcast. I'll shoot him a link.
Man, that's awesome. Very cool. Hey, Aaron, what you
Hey,
got, brother?
let's read off some more of the artists that he's worked with, because that was a great list, Eric. You have that in front of you, don't you?
Yeah, so I see Nine Inch Nails, Gwen Stefani, who I'm a huge fan of. I love No Doubt. I'm too bad No Doubt's no longer right now, at least from what I understand. Motley Crue, of course, you mentioned Madonna, Janet Jackson, One Direction, Journey, man, Muse, Eagles
Did you
too.
say
So I mean,
Muse?
got some classic rock in there. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
It's a we have a diverse clientele there. I mean, we're working with some hip hop guys, and we're working with some teeny boppers, and we're working with some really old school legacy acts like the Eagles. So it's a nice mix, and you get different vibes and different needs and wants and ideologies, and so it's cool from that perspective. But the backbone and structure for us pretty much remain the same.
So, Todd, segueing into your book, excellent book. Thank you very much for sending it to me. So, for the audience out there, we'll have a link in our show notes so you can pick up Todd's book from his website. But the book is called Protection for and from Humanity. And it is a book that's kind of a quick reference guide, field manual for protection services. Now, Todd, I'm just curious it certainly reads like a field manual, a lot of incredible information, not just field manual information, but just you can tell that you write your experience into it and how you plan your ops for your clients, so on and so forth. But can you describe to the audience what your primary intent? Because frankly, it seems to be for that clientele for protection professionals, but it'll definitely work for your average civilian as well. Can you hit on that?
The intent of the book, it was twofold. One was I had helped somebody with some things, a friend, and utilized some strategies and processes and systems that I had learned in the military and law enforcement, and I basically modified it to make it simple and apply to kind of daily life, and it worked out very well for him. And he kept bugging me to write a book, and then COVID happened, and with entertainment, people kind of crawling into shells, that shut down a lot of business, and I was able to actually write it. But the intent for the book was basically for the average person, right? What skills do you learn in the military and in law enforcement, like special operations, meaning SWAT, SRT, that would help people to protect themselves or their families or their businesses? And so I tried to take the core concepts of things that I've learned over the last 30 years and put them together. So we talk about kind of the difference between security and protection. We go into the difference between being in the military and law enforcement and then going into protective service. And that there's a huge deal there. When you have this infrastructure in the military and law enforcement to support you and legally justify you, it's very different than when you're protecting somebody overseas and you don't have any legal authority and you don't have a big infrastructure. So we talk about that and why and how it works. We get into mindset and problem analysis solution, a lot of situational awareness, and we really refer to it as environmental awareness and talk about that. We get into components of adaptability, what you can do to be more resilient and adaptable to certain environment changes, and planning components and things like that. We do some crossover stuff from baseline anomaly stuff, basically coming from the Marine Corps Combat Hunter program, a little bit of that. We talk about criminal minds and kind of what criminals are after, so you know how to target harden to reduce kind of your signature and not be low-hanging fruit for criminals. Concepts, ideas, processes. We get into soft skills and hard skills. And the big thing for us, we probably focus mostly on soft skills. So how you think, human behavior components, how you see stuff, how you process information, like what is data, what is info, what is intel, and then how do you use that to drive your decisions? Different human behavior components that are telling for you. Whether it's proxemics or, what motivates a person to do something. We use the acronym MICE, which comes from the military and law enforcement. We get into assessment systems for risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, and threat assessments. One of the ones that we've used a couple times now is Carver. And then we talk about hard skills. Obviously, with a book, you can't really do much with hard skills. So what we do is we talk about, the shooting, fighting, driving kind of stuff. And then trying to discuss the concepts of layered security approach and how you would put that into place. And most of that also is mindset, but we talk about those hard skills. And then, as Eric was mentioning, we talk about the way that we approach advancing for our clients and talk about how we advance hotels and airports and events and restaurants and vehicles and drivers and all that good stuff. And then we move into and kind of wrap the book up with foreign travel, right? What do you do overseas? Who are you dealing with? How do you get info before and after? How do you get, verified intel from sources on the ground? How do you develop those sources? How do you map? How would you select that route in a foreign country with what you have available to you? So it's a broad stroke, and I think that it's fair to say that it's very field manual-esque.
Yeah, well, and I really keyed in on something that really stands out to us because of how we have learned to prioritize self-defense or the whole self-defense paradigm for the average citizen. You said you focus really more on the soft skills, and I don't know if it's a one-to-one relationship that we're talking about, but we always prescribe that the most important aspects of your personal security you can't hold in your hand.
100%. I absolutely, unequivocally, I agree with that.
So so if maybe you could just kind of go a little bit deeper into what you mean by those soft skills, and if you could even frame it towards towards the civilian, if say, hey, here's some overlap between what I'm teaching my clients and higher level protectees to what I would tell you as an average citizen.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to do given 2021 and how disconnected people are. And really, I know everybody says situational awareness, but when I walk around, I look at people and I listen to what's going on around me and I take stuff in, I see that people are disconnected. They're staring at their iPhones, they got their earbuds in, they're talking without paying attention to what's going on. You don't see their head move. People are in different worlds, and whether they want to disconnect because they don't like what's going on, or they're connected to something else that's either electronic or out of this world, I don't know. But the first thing is if I'm starting at the very beginning, I want to make myself a hard target. So part of that is how I think. I need to think critically and think on my feet, but I also need to be able to look at what's going on and be able to basically siphon the information that's coming. And part of that too, I need to be able to be a hard person. I need to be tough. I need to be able to handle challenges. And so for me, just for a simple example, I'm going to train martial arts. It's going to be jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. It's going to be every day. It's going to suck. Yes, I can beat most of the people, but I'm going to put myself in situations where I'm exposed. And so now I'm building toughness and resiliency through having these exposures, these incremental exposures to pain and stress and problems. And jiu-jitsu also, and Muay Thai too, are problem solving, right? Under stress. This guy's punching me in the face. This guy's choking me, and I've got to make the right decision. So that's one thing. Firearm skills, driving skills, all these skills are really important ahead of having an incident, not after it happens. So that's one thing. We work on the mindset. We work on how they look at things. A really big part of in the book what we talk about, to be very frank, is out of the Combat Hunter program. And I work with a couple guys that developed it. And that is to basically take in what's normal in your environment. I'm looking around and I'm establishing normalcy, so a baseline, right? That's how they would refer to it. So once I establish that baseline of what's normal, meaning how many people are in that environment? What is their dress? What is their behavior? What's the mood or the vibe? What's the lighting like? And I start to take in all of these factors. And so now I know what's normal. So when something happens that's not normal, what we refer to as an anomaly, I can assess it. And I can say, is that anomaly benign or is that anomaly critical, meaning it could hurt me? And if I think it can hurt me, then I need to make a decision. And in the Marine Corps, they use the BAD algorithm, BAD, baseline plus anomaly equals decision. So my decisions, at least for us, not in the Marine Corps, but for us, it comes down to the 3 C's. And the 3 C's for us are continue as planned, change course or action, or cancel. Right? And so when people are walking these environments, seeing these things happen, it's really important for us to make sure they understand that, hey, if I come into this environment, something could go wrong and I need to have a plan for it. And so the first thing is we try to stay out of problem areas. Now, you can't do that, say, if you're in law enforcement or if you're in the military or if you're protective services like me. But the first step for us, and this comes from our 5A program, is awareness, right? Maintain environmental awareness. The second component is avoidance, right? Don't go where problems are. And if you have to go, pick the time of day where things are less likely to happen, or pick that part of town that is less nasty. And when something starts to happen, leave. Instead of pulling out your iPhone and recording it and standing there and watching the show, leave. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked into the show and you're going to become a target of opportunity. So, don't go where the problem is. Don't stand out. Be the gray man. Don't be the person with a ton of jewelry on, stuff like that. And then we start getting into, in the 5A's programs, we go from awareness, avoidance into angles. So creating angles of advantage, angles of opportunity, where if something does happen, I can move away quickly, or I can access a weapon, or I can make a call, or I can do something that's going to help my situation. The fourth A for that one is avenues. And so for us, it's avenues of escape, right? We're always figuring out where we can go. And you can think of it in terms of being in a restaurant or a hotel or an event or even at your house, but probably one that everybody listening is familiar with is in your car. If you pull up bumper to bumper on the car in front of you, you have no way out, right? So the car behind you pulls up on you. So just leaving, those avenues of escape open, right? Those are really, really big deals for us. And then the last one kind of ties into the mindset thing in the training in martial arts and firearms and all these other things, which is aggression, right? So if somebody's scouting you and they're looking at you from a distance and you think they're following you and you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to move over to this side. So you cross the street and they cross the street, and then you cross back over and they cross back over. That's confirmation that they are following. So at that point, I need to be looking aggressive. I need to look like I'm about to get big and mean, and I need to have weapons of opportunity, keys, knives, gun, whatever I have in my hand, ready to go. And then if I'm attacked, I need to be aggressive. I need to stay in the fight. A lot of people today seem to just say, "Oh, if I give them what they want, then I'll be okay," and they just kind of go fetal. And then they wonder why bad things happen to them. So we don't agree with that mentality. We don't look for problems, but when the problems come to us, we want to solve the problem. So that's a big kind of a broad stroke for you. If you have anything specific, in the book, we spent a lot of time talking about criminal minds and what they're after and how they pick their targets, and that also is a pretty considerable portion.
That's a really fascinating aspect. We've had the late great Dr. William April on a few episodes, and he had a lot of knowledge that he shared with that. But I mean, maybe when it.
It's the fourth person to mention his name to me in the last week. And what's really crazy is I didn't know him in that capacity. I was shooting at a Rogers range, and he was one of the guys that was shooting with me. And he told me what he did, and that was great. And then I didn't investigate anymore, and I was busy doing my thing, as we are these days. And then a guy last week mentions his name, talking to him, like, yeah, I was shooting with, who's that guy? And he explains to me, shows me a picture. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I went shooting with that guy down in Tennessee at this Rogers range. And then another guy, same week, last week. And then a gentleman died who I don't know, and he was over by Fort Bragg, and a gentleman who runs the Carry Trainer podcast and YouTube channel. I was talking to him about that. He's leaving to go to a funeral. He had wanted to come to another training, and he was mentioning Will as well. And I'm like, man, I've had 4 guys mention this dude's name. Like, it's crazy. And I knew him, but I didn't know him. So that's kind of a miss for me, because I would have loved to have talked to him about some of those things. I heard a few stories posthumously.
Yeah, he was a great man, full of knowledge, a very, very humble and just frankly loving guy that is definitely missed. He is part of what we often talk about here is the ShivWorks Collective that kind of started with Craig Douglas, one of our biggest mentors. But about William April, he did a lot of studies and primary information gathering from criminals in the jail in New Orleans. So he spent many, many years coming up with essentially what kind of a profile criminals looked for as they are, of course, casing a way to make a buck, right? So, I mean, it'd be fascinating to see kind of, maybe at least in a nutshell, what you cover in the book regarding that.
Yeah, for us, right, the thing is that we're talking to normal, average, everyday people who are the ones that essentially get selected by criminals. Because if a criminal looks at us and, we're paying attention, we make eye contact, we're physically fit, we're muscular, we look like we're doing something, we have intent, they're like, I don't really want that one. I want an easy target. They want to spend less time on the X, because the longer they spend on the X, the higher the probability that law enforcement will either get to them, and or a third party will get involved, and or they'll get captured on camera. So they want to get their thing and get out. And so we have to know, do we fit in the environment or do we stand out? Can we become gray or not? And I think that that's a big part of what we talk about, but also it's a big part of life now. Like we wander around like everybody's good and everything's wholesome, and oh no, we have to accept everything. Everybody's good and we need to treat everybody like they're good. And like it doesn't work that way.
No.
And I know that it's not PC for me to say that, but the reality of the world, no matter where you go, there's good people and there's bad people. And a lot of people are in the middle. And depending on their situation, they can shift very quickly. And so we discuss a little bit of that, but most of it's focused on target hardening, how we look at the situation, how we can be a hard target, and basically what they're looking for, and then kind of getting into a broader attack cycle. We talk about the cycles with the standard criminal, right? One thing that I think people don't understand in America is that a lot of the criminals belong to a criminal enterprise or a network, whether that's a gang or a mafia or whatever you want to call it, a cartel. That has a structure. They have a way of doing business. They have a process, right? And so they operate that way. And in a business in America, you're operating to make money, to make a profit, and they're doing the same thing. And there are certain things they can do and can't do, certain things that will get them in trouble, and certain things that will keep them from getting in trouble. And so we talk to that, and then we even at the very end of it, we get into kind of an attack cycle for like terrorist organizations, which is something very different than the standard criminal in the States. But being able to recognize that and see something occurring, and then being able to identify what it is, and then notifying whoever you need to notify. So it's pretty broad stroke. I think most of the book is somewhat broad, and then we get kind of more detailed in systems like Carver or Coca or any of these existing systems, TED, and DDDRM, stuff that I think you would be familiar with already.
Actually, I'm not, unless I'm just not recognizing the acronym.
No, so let's talk about it. So basically, when we do assessments, right, we form a team. We get this team together, and they establish like their objectives and the scope or responsibilities of that particular assessment. And then you start with normally a data collection phase, right? So I have to define and prioritize my assets. And what do I have here? So you inventory the asset, figure out what it is. You identify what the missions is and or functions of something, a group of people, or let's say a music tour, or whatever it may be. And then you characterize those assets, whether they are physical assets or humans. And then you conduct a general threat assessment, right? And so when you start there, you look at like adversary ID, like who am I worried about? And we talked about this a little bit when I talked about the music tours, and I said, we do a demographic, right? We pull the demographic and we look at who we have coming here. Let's say 70% male, 30% female. They're heavy drinkers. They don't use crystal meth. They don't mosh. They don't crowd surf. That's kind of the same idea. Mm-hmm. So then that helps us to do the next phase, which is to set up what they call DBT or design basis threat, right? Like, what is the process that they're going to go through to have this threat carried out, right? What are these things? What are the things that are going to align? What are the variables that are going to align to create the problem for me? And so once you do that, then you try to put in this layered security approach, which we commonly refer to as concentric rings, into place, right? And this can be for people, this can be for places, this can be for things. And I'll break it down to you more on the music side so that it ties into what we already spoke about. But the DDDRM that I mentioned is deter, detect, delay, respond, and mitigate, right? So the first one is deter, right? So the best fight for us is the one we don't have. Everybody knows that. Everybody agrees. And that can be a gunfight. That can be an MMA fight. If we don't have the fight, we can't lose the fight, right? So in protective security, our job is to evac, not to stay and fight. The only time we stay and fight is when we can't evacuate and we want to create space so that our principal can live and we have some type of extraction team that's removing them. So for us, the first thing is don't have the fight. So deterrence, right? So we have an outer layer. So think of whatever stadiums in your area, right? They have an outer layer. So the outer layer might be a fence around the parking lot of the stadium. Before you even get to the stadium, there's a massive parking lot. And then there's a big fence around that. So on the outer layer around the fence, we have that layer of fencing. Maybe we have cameras. Maybe we have a roving patrol. Maybe we have dogs. Then we have these access points that we're covering. So that's a deterrent, right? Because it's not, you can't just walk up to the venue. You literally have to stop at that deterrent. So that's one. Two is detection methods, right? So once you make a breach, you have to be able to detect it somehow, right? And so some of the same things that we use for deterrence are also the methods that we have to detect. That can be alarm systems, that can be CCTV, provided they're monitored full time. That can be dogs that alert. That could be sensors or tripwires or whatever other component we might have available to us. That can be, guards in a watchtower, right, that have elevation that are looking down and scanning and assessing, and they see the breach and they report it via some type of comms. So that's our detection method. And then we try to delay that entity. So if it's a person that's breaching like a stadium and they get over a fence or through a fence or under or around a fence, whatever it is, and they're breaching, they become identified by, let's say, a guy in a guard tower. He's relaying via comms to some type of reactionary force. We try to delay them so that they can't get right up to our thing of importance, whether it's a person or a piece of equipment or a diamond or whatever it may be. So the longer that we can delay them, the more time we have to respond, right? Which is the R, response, right? So you're going to interdict the threat. And so DDDR, response, is that quick reaction force, that group that's going to respond, get on that, and hopefully solve that problem. And then the last one is M, which is mitigation, right, or mitigate the threat. So you're trying to basically either reduce the effectiveness of the attack that occurred or was attempted, or you're dealing with it from a legal perspective. So you have managers and lawyers and those kinds of guys, or it can even be accountants helping you to deal with that. It can be an insurance policy that you use for mitigation. So deter, detect, delay, respond, and mitigate. Now, this isn't new. This isn't cutting edge stuff. This is stuff I learned, 25, 30 years ago. So it just doesn't get put into play for the average person, which is why I put it into the book. And the more layers you can create, the better or safer you are, the more effective your security structure is, assuming that each layer is doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, and I loved hearing the end there, what you talked about, basically the mitigation plan with the legal and then maybe even accountants involved. You can kind of compare that to an after a shooting of a civilian, that they usually don't think about that portion, that's the second fight, right? Whether they had a good shoot or not, there's lots of issues to deal with, emotional, possible civil issues, and then of course, if you had a questionable shoot, there's some deeper legal issues. So
That's part of our process. And one of the things I think that, and I appreciate what you're saying, it's absolutely spot on. You need to think about that ahead of time and put that apparatus in place, because after it happens or when it's happening, that's not the time. It's too late, and that's going to cost you. So the follow-on to that, in the same vein as what you're talking about, is to be able to analyze consequences of these things, like the effect of a loss and the severity of a loss, right? Some small loss isn't going to be that significant, but you have to look at the other areas too. Is it a political loss? Is it an economic loss? Is it a psychological loss? Is it an operational capability loss? Those are pretty serious things. So that mitigation phase is no joke.
The book has a lot of information to cover. So, so glad you put it out. And just a reminder to the audience, his book, Protection for and from Humanity, we'll have a link in the show notes for that. Now, Todd, I would like to pass this on to Eric so we can kind of segue into where we meet on a lot of our philosophies.
So Todd, kind of segueing into how we apply some of the knowledge from your book and a lot of what we also espouse. In the book, you talk about realistic training plans. What is your thoughts on applying pressure testing? Because I've heard you speak on it, and how folks that are serious about self-defense, how should they apply pressure testing in their training?
I'm very big on it. In fact, I probably lose a lot of business because I believe in it, and I don't want people getting hurt. But at the end of the day, you got to test what you believe is real for life or death type situations. And I think that's true also for me in martial arts. Right? You have esoteric martial arts, Tai Chi, Aikido, things like that, or you have combat arts, wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu Jitsu, and you're constantly pressure testing. That's what you're doing all the time. And in the firearms world, you have guys that go to the range and they're shooting paper targets at a known distance, very calm, very relaxed, nothing's happening. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're sighting your weapon, you're getting a BZO or it's a FAM fire just so you can become familiar with your weapon. But that's not very realistic, right? Because you're not moving, the target's not moving, you're not introducing kids into the environment, your heart rate is not through the roof. Hormonal heart rate is going to be way higher than you doing some push-ups. And so, we pressure test everything. And I'll give you an idea. One of the things that we do is we do defensive tactics training for law enforcement agencies. And we do local, state, and federal, but most of our business is state and federal. And when we deal with the guys, we teach them systems, but they're not standard jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or anything like that. They're relative to guns. Guns are introduced into everything. Knives are introduced. OC's introduced. It's real, and we're doing things with testing. And when you test things, you do occasionally have injuries. People are going to get scraped up and cut up, and sometimes they'll break a bone or tear, something, and that's how it works. But if you're walking in and around cars, you got to fight up against the wheel of the car, the axle. Sometimes you get stuffed under the car. Sometimes you're fighting them in the back seat if you're talking about control and custody of a prisoner, right? Sometimes you're fighting on the hood of a car. That changes your angle. Sometimes you're on the side of a hill. Sometimes you're on rocks. Sometimes you're in a creek. Sometimes you're on sand. Sometimes, you're in mud. And so we go through all those phases because that's the reality of life for protectors, right? For the military, for law enforcement, for protective services. And I think you just have to. I mean, I started that way at a young age. I've had the best mentors you can imagine in my life, some really, really great mentors. And one of my first ones was a former Marine and former St. Louis City cop who was pretty hardcore. We ended up getting put aside or pushed aside in a karate school because we wouldn't do point karate. We were doing bare knuckle karate, like Kyokushin karate. And so he was the guy that actually told me I need to go train jiu-jitsu. And everything we did, we tested. It wasn't just a theory. Like, guys can talk until they're blue in the face. But what we did is, okay, you think that works? Let's find out. And it's not work one time with one guy. It's got to work repeatedly over time, more often than not. And it's got to work with different body types, right? When you start to think about, okay, well, that works for a tall, long guy, but it doesn't work for a short, thick guy. So length, thickness, athleticism, mindset, right? Are they passive or are they aggressive? It's going to change. And so it has to work for the vast majority of people before we incorporate it into our system. And I that's my mindset for everything we're doing, whether it's protective services, martial arts, defensive tactics, shooting. Simple and basic, but works under pressure.
Yeah. So you're talking about this, Aaron. Again, you're talking about high percentage techniques or even concepts, like you said, that work across a broad application in for the normal person. Kind of like an 80-20 approach or something like that, correct?
At a minimum, yeah. But yes, I am. I'm not a big fan of tournament martial arts, but I had this conversation. I used to do it 20-something years ago, religiously, traveling around the country competing in MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. And, I did it more for pressure testing myself. Did it work when the guy was given 100% resistance? Did it work when the guy was really good at what he was doing? He was the top in his division in weight and whatever else. And we had this conversation, and it came up, about same thing now. Like, could you do it now? And my answer is, well, there's only one way for me to find out. So what do? I go sign up for the U.S. Nationals in Las Vegas, in June. I don't know. Guess what? Let's see if I can do it. And so in my case, I'm lucky guy because I went and I applied the most basic, simple jiu-jitsu style, the same stuff I do with kit on. When I have full kit on, I can do the same moves, right? And I focus on the same things. I'm not worried about points. I'm not worried about advantage. I'm worried about positional dominance and then getting to that submission, being able to subdue, being able to apply a restraint. And consequently, even at the highest level in the black belt division at U.S. Nationals, guess what? It works, and including passing people out unconscious because they don't respect the thing that's really simple. So, I try to do that. I don't just say that. I'm actually putting my ass on the line when I do that because obviously, if I go out there and get my ass beat, I look like a clown. I can espouse these ideas, these concepts. It's just like in firearms when you have an instructor who won't shoot. Like he's telling you what to do, but you don't get to watch him shoot. And so obviously you have to demo everything for your students so they
Yes.
know you can do what you're telling them you can do. And that's good for a lot of reasons. Sometimes you're going to fuck up. And if you do, they also get to see that you're a human. And that's good.
Mhm.
But you got to put your ass on the line. I really firmly believe that. Pressure test everything.
And speaking of that, you were referring to the U.S. Nationals. You recently won that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's the one that I'm referring to because okay, let's go test my theory, right? I say what I do works in protective services. It works on my SWAT team. It works on, in the Marine Corps. It works in whatever environment. It works on the street. It works with the Guion, with no gi. It works in MMA. Whatever the things are that I do. And then they say, well, I don't know about that. And they kind of roll their eyes like, you're an old man. I don't know. And you go do it. And that's the only way. Just put your ass on the line and try it. And guess what? If I went and it didn't work, I would stop doing it, right? I'd have to modify what I'm doing for my particular situation. So lucky for me, what I've been doing has worked.
Yeah, and you're reminding me of actually a couple of weeks ago we hosted Cecil Birch here in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a great seminar, and I find it really interesting that what you're talking about is going to a major tournament like the U.S. Nationals and simplifying what you're working on because it's high percentage techniques that are successful. And when you kept it simple and into concepts or principles instead of just thinking about, I'm going to do this omoplata or I'm going to do this specific arm lock, etc. You're just using principles, right?
Yes, absolutely. Very simple principles. And that's another thing to take into consideration. You mentioned omoplata and arm locks, and even though I would do them in a jiu-jitsu gym, I don't teach them for DT because when a person's on bath salts, yes, you can take their arm away from them, but that doesn't end the fight for you. And the longer they're in the fight, the higher the odds are in their favor, not yours, right? Because they don't have to comply with laws or rules. They're not worried about getting hurt. They're not worried about anything. And we are, as good people, we want to obey the law. We want to go home to our family. We want to make sure we're doing what's right and just. Criminals, by and large, don't think that way. And so, when we look at arm bars and we look at omoplatas, those, even though we can get to those very easily, that doesn't end the fight the way something like a neck restraint, what you call a rear naked choke, or a lateral vascular neck restraint, or vascular neck restraint. Those things end the fight, regardless of how big they are.
Mm-hmm.
And also the damage. Think about the damage to an arm if you hyperextend it or you have a compound fracture of the arm versus someone passing out, their heart rate drops, their blood pressure drops, they come to, and they're in cuffs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a hard thing to get across to people, how safe, just as long as the practitioner knows what they're doing, but how safe a choke, they don't understand it when you say it's a choke. It's simply a restraint, like you said, and sometimes you may have to put enough pressure on where they lose enough blood to their brain that they go unconscious for a little bit. But guess what? They may have came out of that instance without a bruise on them, it's just pretty amazing. It's hard to get that across to people.
Well, look, you can do a risk-benefit analysis on that, right? And I can say, they're doing something that justifies deadly force usage on me. So if I'm looking at a simple force continuum, I say, okay, this guy's doing this thing and I'm justified in using this level of force. The most kind thing I can do is put them to sleep, because the alternative is I pull a gun out and I shoot them dead. That's not a great alternative. I'm going to save, theoretically, a lot of time and money and energy by putting this guy to sleep, again, lowering his blood pressure, lowering his heart rate, take him into custody without any damage, and then moving on, right? You're talking about a very low percentage of times where people have serious injuries. And one is either it's improperly applied, which is a problem because they're not getting enough training, or that person has pre-existing injuries or a condition that leads to that. And we know this because we see guys in MMA and jiu-jitsu and judo and all these things where guys are passed out all the time. They come to and they're fine. So this happens, hundreds of times a day, and people are not dying. So, we can prove that whether people want to hear it and it passes, the muster. I don't know with the court of public opinion. That's a whole nother story.
Oh man, yes, and yeah, we could go and talk about that for a while. The fact that I don't want to take us on a tangent because we're getting pretty close to using up your time here, Todd. But yeah, it's just amazing that the politicians want to take chokeholds away from police officers, and they just have no idea what they're talking about. So,
yeah, if you ask me, if I'm doing something and I'm having some type of altercation with law enforcement, you ask me, would you rather they choke you or would you rather they shoot you? My answer is going to be 10 for 10. Please apply a rear naked choke or a lateral vascular neck restraint. I don't want you to shoot me. So
that's very simple, and I think even Nancy Pelosi could understand that. Right. Well, so on that note, let's take this on a lighter note. I'm sure you're going to be able to answer this question pretty well. This is one of our most important questions on the show, and that is, what are your 3 favorite bands or musical artists?
Oh man, you guys are going to hate it because I'm all over the map. So
Bring it, man.
I listen to every kind of music there is, except I really don't listen to hip hop. For whatever reason, I'm not drawn to hip hop. But I listen to rock. I listen to country. I listen to a lot of Latin music. I spend a lot of time in Mexico and South America, so a lot of stuff that I'm listening to is either Latin urban or bachata or merengue or cumbia or salsa.
Cool.
Like I listen to what probably nobody in your audience knows, a Caribbean group called Aventura, who doesn't even exist anymore. It's a bachata-based group. They do cumbia. They do a little bit mix here and there. So I listen to a lot of that kind of stuff. It's kind of soft.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah.
And then I listen to country, kind of like Luke Combs. I would say I listen to most in the country genre more than anything else. And then obviously recently Aaron Lewis got my attention. So I've done tours with him, but in the music industry, you're only allowed to talk about or have one perspective. And obviously he said, I'm going to say what I want to say. And that's pretty inspiring for him to be able to stand up like that and say what he had to say. So I listened to him recently. And, I listen to all the rock groups that I work with, but I don't listen to them outside of work just because for me, it's just like going back to work.
Sure.
Even if I liked them when I started with them, by the time I'm done, you get through rehearsals and you've heard that song 5,000 times and it's like a nightmare. And when you start a tour, you basically go to sleep when you can. And usually we work 18-hour days, 6 days a week. But when you go to sleep, their music is in your head. Like you're literally dreaming the music. So I try not to play that kind of stuff. I even listen to a lot of Middle Eastern stuff that I found overseas in Turkey and Northern Iraq, a lot of Kurdish music.
Man, that is really cool. Amazing answers there. I'm glad that many people haven't heard of those because, again, we try to get different information out there. And I'll tell you what, Todd, you have delivered some very unique information, unique perspective. And man, we just appreciate you coming on. We'd like to let you go tonight, but before we do, why don't you just give a shout out and let everybody know how they can find you, find more about you, and of course, how to get your book.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I appreciate the conversation. It's nice to talk to like-minded people and guys that are motivated and interested in the subject matter because it puts some people to sleep. But for me, you can find my business, well, at least one of them, at tourprotection.com, TOUR protection.com. And that'll have some pretty basic stuff, but you can get information there. One of the things that you can get there is a PDF on the front page, and it'll say the 5 A's of survival. And this is us giving the general public information to help protect themselves. And we talked a little bit about that today when we talked about awareness and avoidance and angles and avenues and aggression. So you can find a little bit more on that there. You look at some of our clients, some of the programs that we have. We have 2 programs. One is called Earn Your A, which focuses on those A's. It's basically half a day of classroom theory and then half a day of practical application. We have another program that's called Phase Line X, and basically that's the middle ground, right? So it's not the military and law enforcement training we do, it's for civilians, but it does have stress inoculation and some exposures that other trainings don't. And there's some information on Phase Line X. Then if you want to see kind of some of the places I've been and some of the stuff that I've done, you can go to toddafox.com, and then you'll just see a ton of pictures, man. Pyramids at Giza, or Machu Picchu in Peru, or you name it, wherever. I think I'm at 148 countries right now, so a lot of travel.
Wow.
And then, some of the jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai stuff, some of the Marine Corps stuff from back in the 90s and whatever. So you got those. And then recently, I've been off social media as long as I could. And then COVID started and they're like, oh, you got to communicate with this. You want to sell a book or a training, or you got to do this. So I'm on Instagram only, and hopefully I don't go past Instagram because I'm not a social media guy. But if they want to find me on Instagram, they can do it at Tour, Tour training, at Tour Training. And we tried to share some videos there. Like I'll put up this week, I had in the story some of the DT training we were doing, a lot of wall work. So guys can see some of that stuff as well. But those are the 3 spots: tourprotection.com, toddafox.com, and at Tour Training on Instagram. And you can find the book, you can find the training, all that good stuff through any of those sources.
Well, that's awesome. Again, awesome conversation. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear this information. But for now, Todd, we're going to go ahead and let you go. You have a safe evening, and we'll talk to you hopefully again sometime.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Eric.
All right, take it easy. Well, Eric, it is time for accountability. We haven't done this in a while. I look back on the last couple of episodes, and I think we skipped it.
Yep.
But and we said we would get caught up. So we usually keep this to a week, the previous week. But I think this time we might at least hit on things a couple weeks ago. But before we get into that, Eric, I have some accountability to throw out there right now. With our guest Todd Fox, he got his beginning with security for Madonna, and guys, I just have to admit that I like some Madonna songs.
Oh, boy. Just kidding. I'm cool with some of her music, too, man. For sure. Her 80s music, man, I appreciate a lot more.
Oh, not her new stuff. But, yeah, I'm sure more than anything, it's nostalgia that makes you like it. Yeah. But I literally just downloaded. I was out on the porch with my wife a couple weeks ago, and I thought, man, I'm gonna download a few Madonna tunes and some '80s tunes, and I've actually been digging it. But I just had to give that accountability because, some of my friends out there, some of our good friends in the training community, they're probably gonna be a little ashamed of me. But hey, this is accountability. Okay, so. Well, I'll go into let's just say real accountability here. Eric, you mentioned earlier that we had that amazing class with Cecil Birch. We're going to get more detail. We're going to get into more detail on that in the next show. But, I just wanted to say that, getting through that class and working up to it, I'll be flat honest. Once we came down off of that, I had not been that motivated to do a lot of the stuff that we espouse here, and it took me a while to get back into the kick of things. Specifically, man, I didn't even feel like dry firing. It was probably 5 or 6 days before I dry fired and realized, man, I've not been dry firing. So I only hit that a couple times in the last week, but I'm getting back into it again. And like I said, I kind of was off the path for a little bit, but I'm definitely back on now. I hit an open mat with my wife this week, and then I hit another class at jiu-jitsu. But beyond that, again, that's been most of what my physical activity has been, besides some swimming and some walks with my wife. But what I did do, which is pretty fun, yesterday I shot my best match ever. I've shot 3 matches now, IDPA matches with my red dot sights, and each one has been just that much better. I'm competing at the highest level that I have ever, and man, it's just so rewarding. I'm sure some people get tired of hearing about it. I think our good friend Brian and co-host gets a little tired of it too. But I think the main thing is it's my vision that it has to be my vision that it really helped. So it's just fun when you're in the middle of a stage and knowing, and you're getting that positive imprint, Eric, that we talk about, that we've learned from Lanny Basham.
Always.
But as you're going through it, you're getting that positive influence. Like, it's like me to burn through this stage and get all -0s. So, I mean, it's a great feeling, and I will at least go down what my stages look like. The highest points down I had in one stage, it was 4 points down, but the rest, there were 6 stages. I had one stage that was just 1 point down, one stage 0 points down.
Awesome, man.
And then the rest were just 2 points down. And one thing I love to say is that one of those stages was full of strong hand only shooting, which I think no one likes, but I was stoked to come out of that one stage. It was a standard stage, limited shots, and coming out of there with only 2 points down. That's the best I've ever shot, those standards. So, man, I think that's about it for now, Eric. What you got, brother?
Well, awesome, man. Great job shooting. It's like I told you via text right now. Shooting is on the back burner for me right now. My focus is on my jiu-jitsu. And so it's like I said, I bet you're out shooting me right now. So, man, keep that up, man.
Well,
I'm pumped how well you're doing.
Well, thank you, bro. You've always been a step ahead or two of me in shooting, so I don't know if that's true. But like I said to you in the text, I said, you get that red dot going and let's see where we are then. We'll talk then.
Cool. I can't wait. I keep going to the mailbox hoping that my slides in from Jaeger works. So I'm super pumped about getting that. Well, Aaron, I want to hit hard on the Cecil Birch Immediate Action Combatives seminar. Again, like you said, we're going to get into way more detail. But I just would like to say that Cecil deserves so much accolades for his teaching capabilities, how much we learned.
Yeah.
And it was fundamentals. I want to be careful that the folks don't, it wasn't basics. It was fundamentals. And it changed my thought process on how I'm going to proceed in my jiu-jitsu. It was that impactful. And again, I want to save the majority of the impactful details for when we have Cecil on here shortly. But suffice to say, man, it was an incredible seminar. I'd say it was 60, 70% of what an ECQC would be. So our folks that know that class know it's an arduous class physically. And so it was awesome to go through that with you and Becky. It was awesome having her there.
Yeah.
And everybody left that class feeling like they had accomplished something. And that means a lot to us in the training community, how important it is to have seminars like that, and that positive imprint you get from that class. Aaron, you probably held your head higher after that class, just like I did, right?
Oh, and Becky did too, and just last night we were talking about it. And she said that when she was on her way home driving by herself, she smiled real big and said out loud, "I did it." That's
awesome.
And because again, she's about to have surgery here in a couple of months because I guess I could explain it this way. She literally has a broken back. She's had her first vertebrae there is bone on bone, and every single time she lays down, that her spine shifts down against itself, but yet she gets after it. Talk about accountability. Just awesome. Yeah. I'm proud of her, and Cecil really liked having her there, and he told us one time on a drive that, man, your wife's awesome. That made my day too. But
I know it did. It did me as well. And another thing too is I want to tell you and Becky, I'm so proud of how well your jiu-jitsu has developed, and it was really cool training with a little more resistance with you guys. And when we had a little training session together at the house, at your guys' house, getting a little train on the day before, and I'm real proud of how well you guys are doing. Well, go ahead.
Well, thank you, brother. And Becky and I went off in the other room, and just to be frank, not trying to puff you up, but Becky was genuinely saying, "Man, wish he lived here because we could get so much better, be able to train with him." So, man, hopefully one of these days that'll happen.
Yeah, I would love that, and I would get better having you guys close to me as well, because we do deliberate practice in everything we do, and I know that all three of us would have that really nice deliberate practice together, and I would love that. Maybe sometime soon it will start to happen.
Sure, and at least sometime soon, or again, we just need to increase the frequency that we get together. Even if it's once a year, that's twice as much as we've been doing lately.
Well, my ticket, because I bought it so far out, it may change soon when all this COVID BS gets in line. But my ticket was only $230.
Oh, awesome!
That's chump change for being able to come home. So yeah, man, awesome time with the Cecil Birch seminar. More to follow on that. Aaron, I admit too, man, dry fire has not been on my priority list either. I only had 2 dry fire sessions this week. They were, again, deliberate practice. But again, we want to emphasize, and we had some interaction with some of our audience members that showed up at the seminar, which was another really cool thing. And we had a third of the class for EvoSec Evolution Security Podcast listeners. So awesome to meet those folks out there and train. So again, it's humbling to have guests like that support us. So thank you guys out there that are listening.
Yeah, thanks.
So as far as live fire, this is my major accountability, is that I haven't live fired in a month and a half. And I'm embarrassed to say that. However, again, I want to emphasize that we can't always focus on all the triad that we push the most. And again, that's the honest truth. And we want to make sure that our audience members know that. And that's one of the discussions that we had with one of the gentlemen in the class that said that, he likes to hear that we don't get to everything we intend to do and or espouse, because, we have to periodize, or periodization, I think is the better word, what we do, or else we can get burnt out, So yeah, so my firearms, I met some of my goals this year in my shooting and certifications, and I'm like, you know what? It's time to focus on my purple belt.
Yeah.
And that, that is my goal. Hopefully I shouldn't say hopefully. That's probably not the word I want to use. Consistency will get me there.
Yeah.
And so with that said, no live fire. I actually am going to go to the range this week because I've, again, have some preparation, going to start teaching classes here again, so I need to be on point for that. I had 3 cardio 2.0 workouts, and I want to emphasize using Larry Lindemann's recommendations. I am periodizing in all my cardio and lifting, because I certainly realize that I keep trying to do both at the same time, and my adaptations aren't there like I used to when I was younger. So I'm on an 8-week cycle of focusing on my cardiovascular, and my strength is in maintenance mode. And so these 2.0 workouts are, an hour worth of cardio, but I'm doing treadmill for 10 minutes or so, and then rowing for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, mixing in kettlebells, different kettlebell exercises, snatches, swings, goblet squats, and keeping my heart rate at 130 to 140. And I mean, you can carry on a conversation at that rate. So my heart rate, my resting heart rate is down 10 beats per minute, which that's huge.
Wow.
And so just focusing on just cardio and not worrying about lifting as heavy and as often, it's been very beneficial. And I'll do this from now on. So I'm on an 8-week cycle. I think I've got 2 more weeks of this, and then I'll focus on lifting for 8 weeks. But I think I may just do a month of lifting and go back to another 8-week cycle of cardio, because I've benefited so much from it. So,
well, Eric, can I interrupt just a
Yeah, go
second? Digressing back to the Cecil Birch class. Every time you take one of those classes, you're at least going to take one huge thing away. One of the first things I learned from ECQC was that I needed to get into jiu-jitsu, that it was clear. Now, from this Cecil Birch class, one thing's for sure, I need to get stronger. Our audience that know us pretty well know that I'm always the guy that doesn't touch on workouts that much, because I'm just not that into lifting. But I'm certainly going to get the pull-up bar that you bought me a year ago. I'm going to hang that thing up. I'm going to start hitting. I'm going to simply just start hitting pull-ups a lot, hitting my kettlebells a lot, and some push-ups and air squats. If I just hit that stuff pretty hard, I'm going to gain some strength.
you absolutely will, man.
So again, I don't ever see myself doing CrossFit like Brian, or having these serious workouts like you do, Eric, in your home gym. But I just wanted to say that's some accountability too, because I definitely need to work on my strength.
Yeah, it'll help you in your jiu-jitsu, and don't beat up on yourself too bad. I still feel like you got the requisite strength. I think you can improve on that, however. But yeah, man, that pull-up bar, just that grip strength you get from it, and just the core strength that you get from pull-ups and chin-ups, man, is amazing. So, yeah, man, get that bar up. So, I guess moving on, let's see here. Oh, one of my cool accountabilities, and this is telling on myself. Some of our audience members may not know this, but this is me admitting to some technical difficulties over the last 6 months. One of which was when I was invited on the American Warrior Society show, where right before the interview, my PC crashed. And so I had to use my iPhone. It was number one, embarrassing. Number two, the audio didn't sound that good. And so I moved to another PC I have, and it starts messing up. And it caused issues this last week with the Todd Fox interview that you guys are listening to. So Aaron and Brian have been razzing. He's like, man, just get a daggum Mac. And I did that, and I'm really pumped about it, because it has me setting up my studio for my drums, and I've got that rolling right now. Did some scratch tracks that I'm super excited, and this MacBook is going to be a major improvement. I don't believe I'm going to have any more technical issues with equipment.
Well, bro,
boo on PCs. I'm just going to say it right here. Part of my job includes dealing with PCs and Windows-based computers. It's kind of like my experience with Fords back in the day. So you'll never see. I'm no offense to folks that love Fords. I just had all kinds of issues with Fords in the past, and I am again pretty pumped about this MacBook for our business
Eric,
and for my personal tasks.
Like I've told you, just in my music, it's part of my triad of instruments.
Yep.
I literally, when I am practicing or just working on music, because a lot of it has to do with listening to music or transcribing music or simply recording music, of course. And then a lot of the time I'm just running a drum beat from my recording software to practice with. My Mac is a third of my gear. I've got my guitar amp, my guitar, and my Mac used all the time. So yeah, it's something I absolutely love. I've had 2 Macs, and both of them ran like tops. The one I have now is 6 years old. It might as well be brand new. It's like it's like a Toyota or a Lexus. You get one, and all you have to do is change the oil and the brakes every now and then. So
yep, that's like my Toyota truck. Same thing, man. And Aaron, I honestly should have done this a long time ago, but I was probably being a cheapskate. So I'm really, really pumped about it. And this thing runs amazing. It's got the new M1 chip that, speaking with Justin, I won't say his last name because, don't want to mention his last name if he doesn't want to be on the air.
He rocks. That's all we need to say.
Yeah. And he told me, he said, man, that chip is stupid. And what he meant is he's like, it's an amazing chip.
Oh, cool. Dude, he knows his stuff. If he said that, man, it's on.
Oh, he's already helped me a lot with recommendations on mixing and software and all kinds of other aspects.
And this is a fun conversation, bro. And to the audience members, we pride ourselves in having good audio on this, high quality audio. And Justin is one of the major reasons that we do and have been successful at that. So thanks to you, Justin, if you're listening, buddy.
Awesome. Well, one last accountability, and this is kind of a cool story. So my neighbor who I've mentioned before, I'll just say his first name, Chris. Shout out to Chris out there, man. It's awesome having you in the neighborhood. Trains at my current jiu-jitsu gym, and he's got awesome mats in his garage. And we've been training in his garage from time to time. And last night we had our normal training session that we've been trying to hit, and our instructor, Lee, shout out to Lee out there, showed up as well, which he does. My understanding with Chris is that's an often occurrence. So
that's awesome.
So having our instructor show up was awesome. And we did about an hour and a half of 5-minute rounds. So first person goes in 2 rounds, then you rotate out. So you're out a 5-minute round and you rotate back in. And we did that for about an hour and a half. So Woo. Real good time, awesome learning. And just, again, you spend your Saturday evening doing some jiu-jitsu, you feel like you accomplished something. So real cool.
Rock on.
Well, Aaron, I think that's about it for me, and I think it's about time to close this out. What do you think?
I think it is time, and again, just another wonderful show, and this has been a fun conversation. And, let me just say this. Eric, you approached me about doing this show and starting our training business a few years ago, and I still just kind of pinch myself with who we become friends with, who we get to talk to, and the information that we learn. So what's awesome is we're here to learn, and then we get to share that information with our listeners. So that's a blessing. So thanks, buddy.
It's a major blessing, and I'm so pumped that you're enjoying this, because when I had the thoughts of doing this for a long time. I mean, I've thought about this for many years. And the podcast kept coming up in my brain, and, you know, having an outlet to help us get better was always on the top of my list. And finally, I'm like, man, let's make this happen. And I'll digress a second. As I heard Jocko say on one of his shows, he said, if you have an idea and you aren't implementing it, it's a shame. It's a travesty that you're not. If you get that idea, you need to drive forward and try it. And that's actually what is like, hey, we're doing this. And it's come to fruition, and I'm humbled by the support we get, and how much learning and how much better we are because of it is just awesome. So, man, glad to have you along, Aaron.
Thanks, buddy. Well, until next show, you have a good one.
You too, buddy. Good night.